introduce our main speaker to you, for you. Adam, come on up.
My name is Adam. I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank the group. Thank you for inviting me to come talk tonight. It's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. Ultimately, it's a responsibility to give back what was so freely given to me. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Tucker. I want to welcome the people that are new. You know, if you're trying AA again, if you don't want to be here tonight, if you don't think Alcoholics Anonymous will work for you, if your sponsor made you come to this. I didn't get to AA because I had a bad weekend. I had a couple of bad decades. And for me, like a lot of us, eventually this becomes a matter of life and death. I mean, every meeting has their perpetual newcomer, especially, in a smaller community. We see that lost soul recycling through the rooms. I live in Los Angeles. I stood up. I mean, that's a city with, at that time, we had 3,000 meetings in the greater LA area. And I stood up for 17 years in my little section of that city. And I had so many chips and key tags. We know the drill, right? I could have played poker with them. I remember one secretary saying, "Give him back." And I did that walk of shame over and over and over again. And looking back at that experience now, if you're new, I thank God for the unconditional love of the old timers. A lot of the old timers that aren't with us anymore. A lot of those old guys that saw me come in and out, and they died with 30, 40 years sober. And they would say things to me like, "Don't even bother taking chips. Just sit in the back. Shut up." No, but in a loving way, right? But they made it really clear to me, and if you're new, I hope you hear this. They made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, because somehow they could see it. They could see it by my demeanor, my lack of interest, my fidgety nature. They had the wisdom somehow to see it just by my attitude, that maybe it wasn't right now. But they were so gracious. They made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, that the doors of AA would always be open to a drunk like me. And I think looking back at that experience now, next to my parents, Alcoholics Anonymous is the closest thing to unconditional love that a drunk like me will ever experience. No matter how many people I burned, how many lives I destroyed, how many hearts I broke, how many cars I wrecked, how many jobs I lost, how many despicable, shameful things I did. And if you are, in fact, an alcoholic, it's the most shameful thing in the world to be the family drunk. Especially if you come from a large family like me. I mean, my mom had 3 sisters and a brother. My dad had 3 brothers and a sister. And she told them everything. From the time I was in high school, one more rubber room, one more overdose, right? He's expelled again. Happy birthday, Dad. I'm in jail. I mean, does anybody here relate to being paid not to come home on the holidays? I mean, just this horrific high price we pay for this despicable low quality of life. I was a straight A student. I was a good kid. I think I was a good kid. Top all my classes. First generation American. I was an only child. And I think now, looking back at it, because you start to see it from a different perspective all these years later, that hindsight, I see the hope and the expectation that parents have, if you're a parent, that they have for their kids. You see it outside the elementary schools, right? In our area, we get they block up the entire city to pick up their kids, right? We want to shoot them. It's an LA thing, but my mom and dad loved me. And to watch them watch me burn my life to the ground. To the point where eventually my mother had sold the family property, she moved, and she didn't leave a forwarding address. That's where I left her when I was in one more institution. So I came home to an empty house. That's the kind of annihilation, if you're new, of all things worthwhile that Bill Wilson talks about. This devastation that happens with alcoholism. And despite all of that, the doors of AA have always been open to people like me. If I lived to be 100 years old, I could never pay AA back for the love and kindness that, some of you people have shown me. I mean, really? Not all. I mean, come on. if you like everybody in AA, you know what it means? It means you're not going to enough meetings. My sponsor said, Adam, you really don't have to like anyone in particular here, but eventually you will learn to love people here you don't even like. That's what these traditions are about. It took me years to understand what that meant. You know, I have a meeting, the Marina Center. It's really funny because there's so many things I could say about this home group. One of the things I'll say is that this is a home group where people come in their shopping baskets, you know, one of those high-end meetings. And we were putting, the guy that was doing the literature, we had this literature racket, we were putting $5 bills in all the pamphlets. 6 months later, every penny was there. And these are homeless people. It's like, just, that's how much respect there was for the literature. But I know one thing. People would come into that group and they would want to change everything about our meeting. You know, the way we ran the meeting, the way we made the coffee, all the, you know, decisions. And 3 or 4 weeks or months later, we'd never see him again. And I was like that in AA. I wanted to change everything about Alcoholics Anonymous. But the longer I've been sober, the longer I've been here now, I start to really, really believe that I want to keep Alcoholics Anonymous exactly the way it is. It's almost like the steps stop me from committing suicide. The traditions stop us from committing homicide. If you don't believe it, get involved in a business meeting. One of us doesn't work the steps, one of us dies. We don't work the 12 traditions, we all die. So I started to respect this thing in a very different way. And what happened to me eventually, and Patrick knows about this because we were in some of the same meetings, and I was in and out for many, many years. And, you know, looking back at that now, I started to come to meetings drunk. That particular meeting, the Alana Club, it's so funny. If you see an alcoholic drunk in an AA meeting these days, 2023, people say things like, oh my gosh, what's he doing here? I mean, that's not ironic. And I don't want to bash the therapeutic community. I mean, I saw the druggy buggy out there, but, you know, I mean, I live in what's called now the Rehab Riviera, right? But I mean, in treatment, you don't see a lot of wet alcoholics in AA. Treatment for me would swoop me up in my most desperate moments, right? Throw me into yoga class. I mean, right? Craft hour. I'm making belt buckles and bongs. They don't know what to do with that. Craft hour. Nature walks. I'm walking to 7-Eleven, getting a big gulp cup, filling it up with liquor, putting a little Coca-Cola on top, right? Walking into the late night Hollywood candlelight meeting, doing some of my best sharing. I mean, this is what's happening, right? We have a chapter in the big book, The Chapter to Wives. I don't know if anybody's read The Chapter to Wives. I never read it, never had a wife. Not of my very own. I know, that's for the Al-Anons. But if you read the chapter to wives, it's really important because it talks about 4 types, type 1, type 2, type 3. And in the chapter to wives, it enumerates them. And the 4th type of alcoholic described in the chapter to wives is a type of alcoholic that's been placed in one institution after another. Sound familiar? The type of alcoholic that typically drinks on his way home from the hospital. And by the time I finally got sober, I'd gone through residential treatment for alcoholism 28 times. Not 28 days like the movie, this is in Hollywood, 28 consecutive times, and I'm wearing that like some kind of badge of honor. I'm thinking that's what makes me an alcoholic. It's become my identity. And I remember telling my sponsor I went through treatment 28 times. I was hoping that would like get rid of the guy, you know, loser. Go find someone that's willing. You know, I didn't want to ruin his batting average. And he looks at me and he says, Adam, going through treatment 28 times, that doesn't make you an alcoholic. And I thought, you're kidding. He says, oh no, that just means you paid $500,000 for a big book. And I didn't think that was funny. And I'm not going to start citing and quoting pages tonight out of the big book. But page 101 of the big book says any scheme that attempts to shield the alcoholic from temptation is doomed to failure. See, treatment was a great place to fatten me up for another run. Treatment has its rightful place in recovery. Even Bill Wilson had gone through treatment. Treatment probably saved my life. Treatment might have slowed me down enough to hear the message. If you ever wonder what all the treatment centers and religions do have in common, it's obvious. They all send their drunks to us. right? Dr. Silkworth talks about we favor hospitalization or treatment for the alcoholic that's befogged or jittery. Some people don't go through treatment. But for me, my experience with all of that, 17 years of institutions, is that treatment never solved the problem. And as an alcoholic, like a lot of us, I always thought the problem was alcohol. I thought it was booze. And I remember someone in AA saying to me, Adam, if alcohol's your problem, that drink, that shot glass, that 12-pack, that little glass of Chardonnay, right? If that's your problem, you're probably not an alcoholic. And then in the very next breath, he says to me, and if you are in fact an alcoholic, the type that's described in the doctor's opinion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, your problem isn't alcohol. And I'm like, what? I mean, it went right over my head. It was like some kind of cruel riddle. I drank over that for years. But what happened to me, because we use the word in AA serendipity, what happened to me is I got around a group of big book literalists. Some of those people started here at York Street, by the way. And these were people in Alcoholics Anonymous, big book enthusiasts that took the statements in the big book, turned them into questions, and directed the questions at me. Very simple ideas, kind of revolutionary to me. Ideas like, was I incapable of being honest with myself? Did I in fact drink because I liked the effect produced by alcohol? Duh, that's a no-brainer, right? How about this? Was I restless, irritable, and discontent by nature? Was that my natural state before my lips ever touched alcohol? Was my greatest obsession that somehow, someday, I would control and enjoy my drinking at the same time? And the last piece, did I pursue that illusion to the gates of insanity and death? And for me, what happened when I started to go through those considerations, for the first time I saw the truth. And the most obvious truth, what we know is the external unmanageability, was crystal clear to me from the time I was a teenager. I was in 8th grade. I was already pissing in my pants. I was already drooling on my desk. I was already passed out under the bleachers, right? I always overshot the mark. My nickname in 8th grade was Space Cadet. I couldn't find homeroom, right? People are picking high schools. I'm already picking rehabs. But if you're new tonight, alcoholism comes in people. It doesn't come in bottles or 6-packs or 12-packs or kegs or shot glasses. Alcoholism comes in people. And the greater aspect of this spiritual illness, as Bill Wilson describes it, centering in my mind, if going through the considerations in the big book shows me anything at all, it shows me that an alcoholic of my type, an alcoholic of this type, cannot really live without alcohol. Not successfully, not happily. And part of what it really seems to mean for me to be an alcoholic, if I'm honest about my relationship with liquor, is that I seem to have a mind that will consistently take me back to that first drink. Every time I get released from an emergency room, a hospital, a fancy Malibu treatment center, right? Men's Central Jail, 5743, roll it up. It's amazing to me. I'm sitting in county jail, casually reading a novel, not a cloud on the horizon. And I hear that number, 5743, roll it up. And I have this visceral compulsion in me that is so powerful that suddenly I can't even stop at the release module for my property. No matter how long I've been incarcerated, like Pavlov's dog, as soon as I hear that number, 5743, roll it up, this compulsion in me. And there seems to be nothing on God's earth that'll stop me from taking that drink. And I come to AA, and these well-meaning people say things to me like, well, don't drink no matter what. And I'm literate, right? I've read the book. I understand what it says at the top of page 24, where it says every alcoholic passes through the state where, what does it say? Even the strongest desire is of absolutely no avail. It says my willpower becomes virtually non-existent. So when Bill Wilson talks about a world of ignorance and misunderstanding surrounding alcoholism, even in AA, sometimes that exists. And I know those people mean well, and maybe for them it's true. But when I hear a statement like that now, when I hear someone say don't drink no matter what, there has to be a friendly translation. And it's go to meetings no matter what, work steps no matter what, maintain commitments no matter what, be of service no matter what. Develop the discipline of steps 10, 11, and 12 no matter what. And somehow, like the doctor's opinion says, this person who seemed absolutely doomed, it says, is easily able to control his desire for alcohol. What a powerful thing that is. What it really means to be an alcoholic, for me, is that I seem to have this mind that will continue to take me back to alcohol. And it's almost like my default mode, like on a computer. And Santa Monica now has a new nickname. It's called Silicon Beach. And the reason they call it that is because we've got about 250 tech companies, Yahoo, Snapchat, Google, that have taken over our city. And the reason I'm talking about that is because we have a lot of really smart people coming into our meetings. Engineers, programmers, guys that speak in Java, right? Python. And here's some simple math for the smart people. Potential plus alcoholism equals 0. Kind of like the quadratic formula, right? All balances on 0. But I've had the privilege of sponsoring a lot of these guys, far my intellectual superior, and we talk about the language that Bill Wilson uses in 1939 and how really advanced it was for that time period, because we use the word today, program, all the time. It's common vernacular. It wasn't so much in 1939, but one of the definitions of the word program, very simple, a sequential set of instructions, just like this, right, designed to bring about a result. Now listen to the parallel language. It's so obvious. What do you do when you get a corrupt file on the computer? Well, you install a recovery disk. And the function of that disk is to restore that program to an earlier point in the process, the original self, if you will. It's almost like our spirits are like a body of water. When they're perfectly still, they best reflect the heavens. I know how to get there with a bottle of liquor. But unless I can develop that sense of comfort and ease that I always sought from alcohol through this spiritual process, a drunk like me will never stay here. See, it never occurred to me that 10 and 11 really become like a viral scan. That if I follow these very simple instructions, like our first speaker was talking about, what happens when I get to 10 is I start to become mindful. I become accountable. I become transparent. Right? I see where I paint the red flags green. It's very interesting because the word promptly, I mean, if you're going to eat crow, wouldn't you want to do it while it was still warm? I mean, look at the wording. Promptly, quickly, immediately, at once. How can that mean at the end of the day? It's right there. Learning how to bookend my day, when I retire at night, and upon awakening, and what happens by doing that is I start to become centered. It never occurred to me when Wilson talks about principles before personalities. It was our founder's future hope that these spiritual guidelines, these instructions would have more impact than, I hate to say, the hysterical, untethered opinions in the rooms, because I love the fellowship. I loved having dinner with you guys. I love going to Denny's. I like the birthdays, the weddings. We have a wonderful time. But you just heard it in that original manuscript, where it said in the first page on the second chapter, the fellowship is but one element in the powerful cement that binds us. And it says it right there. It's a warning. It said it would have never held us together as we're now joined. See, for me, the fellowship, I mean, it's wonderful. My mom would have parties with 300 people. I was surrounded by people. We had the Dalai Lama at the house, and I'm not bragging. That's LA, right? But see, the fellowship gives me enthusiasm. It gives me inspiration. It gives me encouragement. It gives me hope, brotherly love. Some people actually find relationships and employment here. But if you unleash a character like me into a large group of people like this without guiding principles, you know what happens? My character defects thrive. Right? I actually get sicker in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous without guiding principles. And if you're new, what that subtly looks like for someone like me is I slowly start to become separate, different, and alone. And what that means, if you haven't heard that terminology, is for me it means separated from God, different than every single person here. We call that terminal uniqueness. We've all heard that, right? And alone, you know, that loneliness, that ache in the heart of every one of us that has nothing to do with the proximity or closeness of other people. That loneliness, right, at the core of my spirit. And what's funny is the bigger the crowd, the worse it is. It's happening right now. My own wedding, my own birthday. That loneliness at the core of my soul, when I hit that pillow at night, that I can't talk about. And if you're new, if you have that like I do, you know what that is? My inability to connect. And you put a couple of drinks in me, I'm calling people from 5th grade saying, I love you. God, I go right into amends. I mean, I'm so sorry. I mean, 2 drinks, I'm standing on the roof of my building, howling at the moon. I am completely in unison with the universe. Couple more drinks, I'm okay with me. Get me good and drunk, I lose interest in selfish things and turn and gain interest in my fellows. See, that's what happens. It creates the illusion that my life is manageable. And unless I can develop that sense of comfort and ease that I always sought from alcohol through this spiritual process, a drunk like me will never stay here. And right next to being separate, different, alone, if you're new, there are 3 fundamental pillars in recovery. The first is to be protected by some kind of God. The second, to be accepted by self. And the third, to be connected to a community. That first piece, to be protected by God. And it's so interesting because a lot of people have talked about this. If you go to the ocean with a cup, you get a cup full of water. Go to the ocean with your whole life. That relationship is so different. And you hear it in every meeting. When we talk about a vision for you, that paragraph where it says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God, right? 1 through 3. Admit your faults to him and your fellows, 4 through 7. And then it says, clear away the wreckage of your past, 8 and 9. You think you can abandon a ship and climb back on? And when I came here this last time, 25 years ago, completely and absolutely bankrupt. It's the only organization in the world where the worse off you are, the better chance you have of succeeding. Very interesting. And you hear it in every meeting. We just read it, chapter 5. We didn't read tonight, but it says, we ask for his care and protection with what? Complete abandon. The second piece, to be accepted by self. And for me, steps 4 through 7, what that means in that part of this process is I develop what's called an internal locus of control. It's a clinical term. You can look it up on your phone after the meeting. It means that I no longer need internal or external validation. What a powerful thing that is. The centerpiece. And the third, to be connected to a community. Protected by God, accepted by self, connected to a community. And I go from being the weakest link. And we were talking about this today, generations of dysfunction. Grandfather, great-grandfather, all the way back as far as we can see, this kind of dysfunction. And to have it healed in this lifetime, it is said that alcoholism is the only disease, when treated, that will actually leave the sufferer in a better position than if they never had the disease. I'd have never believed that. I would have never believed it until I got around people around here that had recovered. I know that word is controversial. But they said really weird things to me like, how free do you want to be? Free enough to just survive this? So when people say, how you doing? You can say, I'm hanging in there. He goes, I'll buy you a drink just to put you out of your misery. Or he said, do you want to be free enough to chase your dreams? Free enough to have relationships that work, free enough to navigate around the drama, free enough to match calamity with serenity, free enough to stay in some kind of fit spiritual condition. And I saw it in that group. That group that went from, and I'll say the lineage, Dan Sherman, Joe Hawk, Don Pritch, which was here, Gary Brown, Paul Martin, Paul Stanley, and Dr. Bob. That's the lineage. They're all dead. They can't get mad at me. Except for Gary Brown. He's still around. But what happened to me, if you're new, is I became teachable. I became willing to take actions in Alcoholics Anonymous that I did not yet believe in. And I look back at 17 years of failure, even in, like I said, one of the largest groups of Alcoholics Anonymous in the world. I mean, our meetings are like huge, huge meetings. And what I see is my defiance towards spiritual principles. And if you haven't read the original manuscript, it said, rarely have we seen a person fail that's thoroughly followed our directions. Now, if you're like me, I don't like directions, right? I mean, I don't like being told not to do something I already don't want to do. That's my defiant nature. I will argue with anybody about anything at any time, right? You tell me it's black, I'll tell you it's white. You tell me it's big, I'll tell you it's small. You tell me to go left, I'll go right with an attitude. And then I'll blame you for eternity. Right, that's why we say denial's an acronym. It stands for don't even notice I am lying. Think about it. You could tell an alcoholic, you can't tell them much. Oh, you don't believe it? Try sponsoring somebody. And what that means is you can lead me into the gates of hell, but you can't push me into heaven. And when we talk about attraction rather than promotion in the 11th tradition, what that means to a drunk like me is eventually I'll come back to Alcoholics Anonymous on my own terms. Not because Sober Living wants me to, not because my parole officer wants me to, not because DCSF thinks it's a good idea. I mean, where I live on the west side, right, they all get sober for the trust fund. It's rough. We just lost another one, right, on TV, like last week. He wouldn't come to the Marina Center. Heartbreaking. But see, hope doesn't matter to a drunk like me until I'm hopeless. And you just read it when we talk about many of us were as hopeless as Bill. One of the ways I was asked to go through Bill's story is to take Bill out of this story, take the stock market out of the story, take World War I out of the story, take gender out of the story, take golf out of the story, and ask these questions. Did I drink like Bill? Did I think like Bill? Did I feel like Bill? And what you read in the foreword, was I as hopeless? You think hope matters to me when I got $500,000 left in the bank? Brand new sports car in the driveway, little boat down in the marina? Please. You wouldn't catch me dead in an AA meeting. And my experience is God didn't matter to me until my back was against the wall. And I can remember it. This isn't gutter bravado. I got the scar. I got shot. Bullet went right through me. I'm laying on the gurney, right? I got 2 paramedics on both sides of me with the paddle. I'm still conscious. Guess what? All I know is God. And if you've ever been confronted with that, right? Think about it. You got your head in the toilet. Anybody remember the dry heaves? Every morning, driving the porcelain bus, puking your guts out. Who prays more than drunks like us? Come on. You don't relate, you might be in the wrong room. And I don't mean to be divisive, right? But what's so interesting about that experience for me is I can remember there's a part of Bill, when Bill talks about having this powerful white light experience. And right on the next page, it says it was quickly blotted out by worldly clamors, most of which were within himself. So I'm sitting in this cardiologist's office. I got a tampon right through my body so I won't bleed out. And he does an angiogram, and he got a screen behind me, and he pumps the dye through my heart. And he's like, it missed. I was drunk in half an hour. I went from God, I will do anything you say, complete and absolute shift, to immense gratitude and hope, to I got to get out of here. I need a drink. And I know if you're new, the only reason I'm saying that for the new people is that there's a huge difference between the act of surrender that got me into Alcoholics Anonymous as a newcomer over and over and over again, and the state of surrender that's keeping the old timers here. It's a completely different concept. It's almost like watching a swan glide across a pond of still water. It's so beautiful, so effortless. It's so graceful. But you know what that swan's doing under the water? He's paddling like hell. And if you're new, and I know y'all know this, but there's a chapter in the book, Into Action. Anybody notice there's no chapter into feelings? I know the therapists hate that, right? Into thinking. There ought to be a chapter into whining, right? From the podium. And what happened to me with that group of big book enthusiasts is they asked me to take actions in Alcoholics Anonymous that I did not yet believe in. They took the little triangle in the circle that's sitting on the front of this podium, and they translated into 3 fundamental ideas. Recovery, unity, and service in action really means contribute, belong, and learn. Now, we were talking about this tonight. There's a therapy out there called cognitive behavioral therapy. We all heard of it, right? It's expensive. In AA, it's $1. And the fundamental idea is I can't think my way into right living, but I can live my way into right thinking. So the way it was suggested to me is if there was a weight pile in the middle of this room and every day I drove iron for an hour, would I get strong? If I did it every day for a month? Absolutely. Does it matter how I feel about it? So what my home group asked me to do was to take these actions that I didn't believe in. That recovery, unity, and service translated into contribute, belong, and learn. That the more I contribute, which is service, the more I start to feel needed. The more I belong at a meeting, the more I feel wanted. That means if I stand at the door of an AA meeting and I say, hi, I'm Adam, hi, I'm Adam, hi, I'm Adam, hi, I'm Adam, eventually I will know every single person in this room. And what I discovered is I cannot separate cause from effect. The more I contribute, the more I feel needed, the more I belong, the more I feel wanted, the more I uncover, discover, and discard that which is blocking me from God, self, and others. For the first time in my life, I was able to give and receive love, altruistically. It's like the steps bring me wisdom, the fellowship where two or more are gathered brought me power. And by reaching back in my community for the first time, I could feel that connection with other people, but it had to be selfless. And the reason I'm talking about that is we were talking about a thing called the Keys to the Kingdom. It's a story in the big book. And at the very end of that story, it says, in exchange for a bottle and a hangover, I was given the keys to the kingdom. But right before that, it said that he talked about feeling wanted, needed, and loved. And what I didn't understand is that is the product of taking these actions. That I took these actions that I did not yet believe in, regardless of my thinking. And just like our first speaker so beautifully said, the lens through which I had seen my life, that distorted, broken lens. Because we were all looking through it. It's like we're all looking through this wall, through these little holes, and some of us have this distortion. Wherever there's hysterics, there's historics. Wherever I have this emotional response, I had this history. And this thing that we did that heals that dysfunction, somehow it cleaned that lens. And for the first time, I got free. What a beautiful thing this is if you're new. And if you don't think AA has evidence-based results, I hate to say this, but go to a world convention. We got one coming up in Vancouver. Unfortunately, if you've got to get a passport. That probably cuts half the room out. But, we talk about, if you go to a world convention, just as an example, there's like 85, 90,000 of us converging on a random city every 5 years. It is so amazing. And by the way, you can't do it with your insurance. You actually have to get a plane ticket, conference ticket, hotel room. You might even have to get a rent-a-car. But when they do the out-of-towners at a world convention, it's like the United Nations. It takes 2.5 hours. Every continent, every city, every country, every hamlet, every township. It is amazing. And for every human being, and listen to the word, that has made that effort, you'll see a son, a daughter, a father, a mother, an uncle, an aunt. You'll see a world of people that will tell you, this is the most powerful thing in my loved one's life. If you ever doubt that we have no evidence-based results, we were talking about it. I know this is on recording, but it's right. You can Google it. Harvard and Stanford both did studies on Alcoholics Anonymous. The agreement is the same. The effectiveness of AA outshines everything else in numbers. Bill Wilson and Silkworth said that in 1935, that all the other modalities that time, that nothing has even come close to this. And you know why I don't think it's going to work for me? Because it wasn't my idea. So thank God we don't look like our stories, right? So what happened to me is I got to one more treatment center, right? I was 120 pounds. I stunk like urine. My fingers were dirty, missing a couple teeth. You know we look, right? I look like a concentration camp victim, I'm in treatment, a vision for you, right? I'm in a nightgown with my ass hanging out, judging the speaker. It's so funny how we're the only people that can literally be on the curb and still look down at the world. I got two speeds, grandiose and comatose. And I'm strutting around the detox bragging about Robin Brink's trucks. I finally did my 4-step. It was a bread truck. It was empty. So I'm sitting there in the treatment center with my fellow associates, you know, the rehab circle, and this woman comes in on what's called an H&I panel. If you don't know, some cities it's treatment and corrections, but H&I stands for hospitals and institutions. We also call it homies and inmates, right? But H&I is a committee that brings meetings into prisons, treatment centers, detoxes, hospitals, anywhere where clients, patients, or inmates can't get to meetings. Our H&I, funny enough, the one on the west side on the second Monday of the month, is about 250 people. And they fight each other to get on panels to talk to people in treatment centers that don't care. But it does look like, I mean, if you go and do this, the real meeting is the 4 people in the car on the way to the institution. That's the meeting. And then we get to leave, which is like floating out. You know, you hear the gate close behind you. But I think that H&I is, like I said, one of the lowest relapse rates in recovery. So we're in the audience. This woman is on this H&I panel. She's doing her AA talk. And at the end of her talk, she looks us all up and down and she says, if I could give you all the gift of recovery, I wouldn't do it. And I looked at her and I remember looking at the guy next to me and I said, what a bitch. And I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I was just not quite with it at the time. And then she said something that would later change my life. She followed that up with, the reason I wouldn't give you the gift of recovery is because I wouldn't rob you of the journey. And all these years later, if you're new, my experience is that journey to recovery, just like that journey to surrender that each and every alcoholic has to walk. If you're new, it's personal. We can't give you that. Again, not to be divisive, but if you're in a hot tub with a supermodel, a fifth of whiskey, and an 8-ball, and daddy sends you to rehab, we don't expect you to be happy. I mean, please, I know it sounds great. Oh, my worst day sober is better than my best day drinking. Are you out of your mind? Please. But my worst day sober is better than my last day drinking, right? The last 5 years where the disease was killing me every day and it wouldn't bury me. When my poor mom said to her friends in all earnestness, I wish he would die, at least he'd be out of his misery. You know, walking around, I mean, I would get arrested. I'd had $10,000 in warrants. They dropped me off at the hospital and tell me about Jesus. This is like 2 Santa Monica police officers. Because it's so sad to watch somebody kill themselves like that. And there's nothing on God's earth, no human power. Yet I got around that guy that said, how free do you want to be? And he took me through a very simple process. And 25 years later, I'm completely free, not only of alcohol, but free from the bondage of self. You know, we say a lot of things here. There's a lot of young people here. Patrick knows I was 17, 18 years old in AA. And 30 years ago, there wasn't a lot of kids in AA. And the old timers would say stuff like, you know what, kid, we spilled more than you drank. We're like, you know what, Pops, we didn't spill any. That's why we got here sooner. Tell them that. I'd rather step on your toes than your grave. That gift of desperation, I could write all day long on step 1. Until I'd beaten down that liquor store door at 5:59 a.m. over and over and over again, or paid the clerk at 7-Eleven $100 for a 6-pack, or driven all the way to Tijuana to get to the bars, or all the disgusting, diabolical, the despicable things that many of us do on that journey to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. You think writing about step 1 was going to help me? I had to have an experience with this, where everything demanded that I stand and deliver, and I could not do it. Because the gift of desperation is a great acronym for God. But you know what? Desperation and hopelessness, since we're talking about hopelessness, are not the same. You know what fixes desperation? $1,000. It's so interesting. In Bill's story, it says, to my fortune, my business associates remained skeptical for the first 2 years of my recovery, during which I found no employment. I go to this men's group. There's like 400 guys, and the guy will get up to the podium and he'll say, last night I got it drunk driving, and he'll get a standing ovation. And then he'll say, you know, my wife broke my nose with a frying pan, and everyone will applaud. And then he'll say, and I got a promotion at work, and everyone's like, oh no. Because sometimes if you're new, my experience is there's one thing that's worse than bad luck for a person in early recovery. For me, it was good luck. That things happen way too quick for me. That gift of desperation. For me, eventually I got to a place where my head couldn't get enough and my body couldn't take anymore. Somehow I lived through that. Skid Row's full of people like that. When my head can't get enough and my body can't take anymore, you know, God means something totally different. It means grow or die. Then I'm going to be really forced to two alternatives, right? And what does it say? Go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation. And what's the other alternative? Oh, accept spiritual help. It's very funny. Faced with alcoholic destruction or to live on a spiritual basis, it says these are not easy alternatives. That's ridiculous. Do a survey at Costco. Jails, institutions, and death. Happy, joyous, and free. What's your choice to be? It's a no-brainer. You step over to my cell in Men's Central Jail, you ask me that question, I'm thinking, how bad an alcoholic death? Right? Can I talk to my counselor, my parole officer, my therapist, my MFT, and get back to you on Monday? And I will justify, minimize, and rationalize my right to drink. The first half of step one, me defending my right to drink. The rest of my life, defending my right to play God. There's a saying, God can't use a man or woman till they come to the end of themselves. And if you're new, what I didn't understand for me is at the bottom, working with a lot of people, the bottom seems to be the same for all of us. From Yale to jail, Park Avenue to Park Bench. The true bottom for me was one, when I asked for help. But more importantly, when I was actually willing to receive it. Do you know how many people come to AA looking for help? Thousands. If everyone came in this room, would be sitting in a football field. I'll put it simply. I throw you a life raft, you look at the life raft and you say, I was looking for a blue one. How do you work with a guy like that? I really don't like the way you threw it. It sounds funny, right? But it's like we're the only people that want a reward because we ran out of a burning building. I mean, come on, if you're new and you're feeling heroic because you gave up your big Saturday night in Denver to hang out with us, this is the only place on God's earth where they'll applaud because you came in to save your own life. Really, you're wondering when the miracle's going to happen? You're in an AA meeting on a Saturday night. It's happened. Jeez. I was told my sobriety is God's gift to me. What I do with it is my gift to God. There was an old guy in our group, Jack R., and he said there are 3 prayers in this life. The first one is, God, help me, right? Most of us say it all the time. It's our prayer. Second prayer, God, give me, greatest distraction on earth. Prayer I never said was, God, use me. And Patrick calls me. And I couldn't be more grateful. I couldn't be more grateful. There was a guy named Clancy, and one of the most important things he ever said to me was, Adam, alcoholics need to be useful more than they'll ever need to be loved. Useful. The purpose of all these commitments is to be useful. Look at the third step prayer, right? Relieve me of the bondage of self. Take away my difficulties. The difficulties, Mr. Brown. Why? Because victory over them may bear witness to those I would do what? Help. Remove from me the things that are blocking me from being useful. All through the book, our real purpose is to be of maximum use to God and the people about me. I never understood that was the thing that would actually save me. That fundamental idea. If selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble, service-centeredness, other-centeredness, God-centeredness has to be the answer. It's as simple as that, the turn away from self-centeredness. Now, I don't want to bring everybody down. I know it's kind of fun to be here, but, I was told by my sponsor to buy a black suit, and I said, why? And he said, well, Adam, he got serious. He says, if you stick around AA, you're going to go to a lot of funerals, it'll come in handy. And then he starts laughing. He says, and if you get loaded again, at least we'll have something nice to bury you in. Brutal. I know it's rough, but you know what? If you baby the alcoholic, you'll bury him. I needed to hear the truth about alcoholism. Fatal, progressive, chronic. We talk about jails, institutions of death. It's like hamburgers, fries, and a Coke. They go together. See, but like it talks about in the doctor's opinion, I cannot differentiate the true from the false. It means I live in a world of delusion. I cannot see the truth. And again, not to bash the therapeutic community. They do a lot of good work. But for me, going through treatment 28 times, I started to speak a foreign language in treatment. You guys know what it is, right? It's called victimese. It's like I don't understand how the drink bone connects to the jail bone. Like I need a class for that? Oh, what's it called again? Oh, relapse prevention. It's kind of like I met her in rehab. I can't believe she drank. Really? No. I knew he was a crackhead. Can't believe he stole my iPhone. And it's so interesting because if you look at what the book says, it says, making decisions based on self that later leave me in a position to be hurt. If I do not connect those dots through inventory, guess what? I continue to play victim. I'm sorry, I know it's hurtful. Victims don't get sober. When I did that inventory, I made that connection. I saw the spiritual sickness. That even the people that offended me and harmed me were spiritually sick. I no longer took responsibility for that piece, but I still had to take responsibility for my recovery. I just heard it on TV with another one of those celebrities. It's not my fault. But at the end of that statement, you know what? If my car breaks down, it might not be my fault, but is it my responsibility to fix it? If I have the tools and the simple kit of tools that are laid at our feet that you just read about, they're right here. It is my responsibility. I know what the problem is. And if you're like me, fear's not going to keep me here. Wilson talks about fear sobering him up for a bit. For me, fear was not enough. Getting a third strike, living on the street, being homeless, losing my career. Did scared straight work for you? Went right over my head. Now, the book talks about the problem drinker, right? Very interesting because it really differentiates the problem drinker from the real alcoholic. Think about it. You get a problem drinker and a real alcoholic in a jail cell, a rubber room for drunk driving. You got two completely different philosophies going on. You got the problem drinker over here on one side of this cell thinking, why did I drink so much last night? I knew I shouldn't have drank so much. Why didn't I take Uber? Real alcoholics on the other side of this cell thinking, why did I take Interstate 76? Now, the court card people never laugh at that joke. That's not funny. Should have stayed on Surface Street. You could have been home cleaning your pipe tonight. Problem drinker's wife says, you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you. Right? Real alcoholics say, if my wife says to me, you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you, you know what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking about single life. That's the difference. And my experience, if you're new, is if anything got in the way of alcohol, it was out of my life. The same relationship. If anything got in the way of booze, it was out of my life. I mean, alcohol was the love of my life, right? It had me from hello. It completed me. Oh, come on. You think I'm going to let go of the love of my life without a fight? I can't even let go of a bad relationship. Everything I let go of has claw marks all over it, right? And if you're new, my relationship now with AA is identical. If anything gets in the way of AA for me, it's out of my life. A woman, I don't care how beautiful she is, how in love we are, my soulmate. I remember the first time I said that in an AA meeting, there she was in the back of the room. She's like, gosh, Adam, you don't look like an alcoholic. Why do you got to go to all those meetings, honey? Oh, you're not speaking again, are you? It's the weekend. Then she tells me, you know that AA thing, it's getting in the way of our relationship. So a couple months later, we're still dating. Now it's the big night. You know the big night, right? Meet the parents night. So she brings me over to mom and dad's house. Out comes the exotic wine. I'm at the head of the table. She's like, honey, you can have one glass of wine. Wait a second. It's one glass of wine, honey. It's just a glass. It's a toast. It's natural wine. Oh, yeah. 4 more rehabs. I stole her purse that night. Oh, yeah. Went down to the hood and got an outside issue. And she came to detox with a get well card. I know, poor thing. I tried to send her to Codependence Anonymous. She wouldn't go. You know why? She didn't have anyone to go with. I can always tell the Al-Anons, they don't think any of this is funny. Right? Can't stand to see us have a good time even here. No offense. So my mom had gone to Al-Anon. My mom had gone to Al-Anon. And there's a little Al-Anon humor I heard from her. You know how many Al-Anons it takes to screw in a light bulb? None. The Al-Anon detaches and lets it screw itself. So I'm redeemed now, right? So I come back in my mom's life 5 years later, 5 years sober. Got a job, got a home, got a relationship, have a car. I came back in her life to give to her. I had taken the traditions off the wall here, and I learned how to apply them to our family, right? For our family's purpose. Our common welfare comes first. Our relationship, our family depends on our unity. What does that mean? I started to apply these ideas to our family. For our family's purpose, there's a loving God who expresses himself. That it's a democratic, we don't dominate each other. I started to learn how to take these ideas and put them in a relationship. Do we really have a genuine and honest desire to stay together? What autonomy really means in a family relationship is like intimacy. Intimacy is not two people looking at each other. It's two people playing different instruments of the same music. Do we have the ability to be independent in that relationship? And it was like really, really powerful. So with outside issues, and this is an analogy, I can get along with a communist if I talk about food, music, and kids. If I talk about politics, we're done. So with my mother, I knew where her emotional hotspots were. And what I learned to do is circumvent those and find out what she loved. She loved cooking. She loved music. She loved history. She had all these things that she loved. There were so many beautiful things. And what I did is I built those things in our relationship. And my mom, someone I couldn't be in the same room with, became my very best friend. Because if a relationship is 90% good and 10% bad, I would burn it to the ground trying to fix that 10%. That's what most of us do. We destroy beautiful things because of those little things. My father was exactly the same. And it's important because this healed my family. I hated my dad. My dad was never there for me as a little kid. And when I went through the history of him growing up, and we were talking about this on the way to the meeting tonight, my dad grew up in World War II. He was 5 years old while my grandmother was hiding him under tables in London while Hitler was bombing London. And at 9, she died of cancer. He was orphaned. And he went and lived in the country to protect the little kids from bombing. By 14, my dad joined the military and went and fought in the Korean War because they were taking kids back then, orphan kids. And I'm expecting this man to treat me like Mr. Brady. If you don't know who that is, go to Hulu. Okay, but what happened was as I went through that process with my father, I started to understand the family dysfunction. And when my dad turned around and looked at me and he said, son, I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you when you were a little boy. The healing was immediate. See, forgiveness is releasing someone from the prison of my own mind. It has nothing to do with the other person. The delusion that if people have to change for me to be happy has to be smashed. So there's a real simple exercise, and I'm going to finish. It says, we realize that people who offended us were also perhaps spiritually sick. And then it says, although we did not like their symptoms, which is column 2, and the way it disturbed us, column 3, like ourselves were sick too. My sponsor said, if you want to prove that statement, everywhere you have a resentment, you have to ask yourself if you're capable of the same behavior. So if I resent you for gossiping, did I ever gossip? If I resent you for lying, did I ever lie? If I resent you for cheating, did I ever cheat? Because I could steal from you. I resent you for stealing. I could steal someone's life by being in a relationship I don't belong in, or staying in something for emotionally, spiritually, mentally, socially. See, I can do a lot of different ways to diminish another human being. So with my dad, I hated my dad for abandoning me. And here was the question: did I ever abandon anyone I loved for my true love, alcohol? And it was right there. And behind every single resentment, there's a lie I have to believe. And the lie with my dad was I had to believe that his love for me should have been more powerful than his alcoholism. And once I got to that, I got completely free of it. See, behind forgiveness, which means, again, to release someone from the prison of my own mind, there has to be compassion. And behind compassion, there has to be empathy. Now, I'm going to take a leap. This might be offensive, but I'm going to restate it for the millennials. We realize that people who traumatized us were also perhaps spiritually sick. Although we did not like their symptoms or the way it traumatized us, like ourselves, we're sick too. As I did that exercise the same way with anybody that harmed, threatened, or interfered with my safety or my innocence or anything else, because it all happened to me. What happened is I got free of it. See, it's really the only prison where the key's inside. And I'm going to finish with it. I know I've gone over. If someone did to me what I did to myself, I would have killed them. If someone did to me what I did to others, I would have killed them. And then I come to AA, and you want me to pray to God? I didn't want God to find out where I was. I'd become bankrupt in those really simple relationships. If you're new, if you really look at the steps by design, they remedy those 3 relationships. Steps 1 through 3, recreate and develop a relationship with God. 4 through 7, recreate and develop a relationship with self. 8 and 9, recreate and develop a relationship with others. It's a very simple idea. 10 maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with self. 11 maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with God. 12 through service maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with others. So coming out of the steps, a selfish, self-centered drunk like me is not only easily able to control my desire for alcohol, which is right out of the doctor's opinion, but for the first time in my life, I'm able to live in harmony with God, self, and others. There was a great spiritual teacher. He was asked, what's the most important thing of all your teachings? He said, love God with all thy heart, love thy neighbor as thyself. And you know what? If God scares you out of AA and you're a real drunk, don't worry about it. Booze will scare you back in. So in 1 through 3, I give it up. 4 through 7, I clean it up. 8 and 9, I make it up. 10, 11, and 12, I keep it up. So back to being useful. I get to fly a lot. I was at an airport, and this is just if I was going to brag about anything, because I know a lot of people brag about a lot of stuff, this is my claim to fame. I'm standing at this airport. I'm dressed like this, and this guy comes running up to me at LAX at the gate. He's wearing a slingshot t-shirt, full body tattoo. He's got the teardrops, and he rushes me. He's like, you don't remember me, do you, bro? I'm like, no, I don't remember you. I mean, I thought he was going to hit me up for money. I didn't know what to do, run. And he's real aggressive. He's got me up against the wall, and I'm like, no, sir. And he's got these 2 little kids with him, and he's got this beautiful lady by his side, and he looks at me. I thought he was going to hit me up for money. And he says to me, 15 years ago, you spoke on a prison panel, and something you said changed my life. These are my beautiful daughters. This is my amazing wife. This is my family. We want to thank you. And the wife starts crying. All of a sudden, the faucet comes on. She's crying. Now the kids are crying. Now I'm crying. We're all crying. I mean, a minute ago, it was like I didn't know whether to run, call security. Now we look like the long-lost family from the old country. I mean, it was like, we're like a huddle. I remember calling my sponsor. My sponsor's like, Adam, you got a big mouth and a good memory. Don't let it go to your head. Click. But if you're new, there are 2 dates in a human being's life. There's 2 dates in a human being's life. The day we're born and the day we find out why. All my life, I thought it was about money, property, and prestige. Relationship, car, job, house. Different relationship, bigger house, different car, faster car, bigger house, different car. See, I was playing musical poisons in the first half of step one. All my life, I'd chased money, property, and prestige. What Alcoholics Anonymous is suggesting that if I chase a spiritual life, money, property, and prestige will chase me. What a powerful thing that is. That simple idea, like when Ebby sat with Bill and Bill saw that Ebby had been inwardly reorganized. The impact of every single person here who is uniquely qualified to help one or two or three persons. If maybe I have even inspired one person tonight, it's a gift that made my life worthwhile. You know, this last thing. When I got out of that 28 treatment center, and I'll be done, the guy that was running the detox said to me, why don't you come back to our lovely hospital next week, tell all the patients here how you managed to stay sober a whole week if you can make it. And he threw me off the property. And I was so hurt. You know, we're sensitive, right? I was so hurt that I had a resentment at him. For 8 years, carrying out this resentment, I came back every week on Thursday night to tell a bunch of strangers how I stayed sober another week, and I was tricked into service. And if you really understand Bill's story, when Bill got out of Towns Hospital in 1935, he said he was a broken man. He had lost everything in life worthwhile. He was plagued with waves of depression. Bill had an idea. Maybe if I go back into the hospital and talk to some of the patients, I'll feel better. He calls Dr. Silkworth. He was a double board certified physician in psychiatry and neurology. He was the leading physician in the Western world at that time that was treating alcoholism. And he says, with all our synthetic knowledge, our ultra-modern standards, we're not well equipped. He couldn't fix us. Just like they said in that preamble, they couldn't fix people like me. And he allowed Bill Wilson to come into his hospital and talk to patients. And what Dr. Silkworth witnessed from 1935 to 1939, he said, quote, was absolutely amazing. And if you look at the first endorsement in the doctor's opinion, it says you can absolutely rely on anything these men say about themselves. That was a letter of credibility given to Bill Wilson by a double board certified physician on the Towns Hospital letterhead. And what happened to Bill was so powerful. He may have had the mind of a king, but what happened to Bill is the same thing that's happened to a lot of us. Bill developed what's called a servant's heart. To come from the place of being helpful. There's only two kinds of people on this earth, guests and there's hosts. The guest is never happy. No onions on my burger, don't like the rent-a-car. What'd you get me for my birthday, you know? But see, the host comes from a different place. And if you're new, if I can leave you with that idea, to be helpful, that you have something very, very special to share with us, I pray that you stay with us. Thank you very much.